We go.
Okay, so this week we're gonna do acceptance and how people accept epilepsy, or rather don't accept it, yourself or with, other people in your family. I've heard a couple people not have positive results from their loved ones, let's say that. So I want to say that acceptance comes in stages. It starts with denial, can go into anger, then depression, then like the bargaining part, which means like you basically like, well, I'm not that messed up because blah, blah, blah. So you try to make excuses for why you haven't accepted things. And it's normal, but you have to get through that in order for, it to get better for you. So I know I've pretty much just come to terms with it. It took a little bit, but I have. I finally realized, this is going to be me for the rest of my life. This is something I'm going to have to manage for the rest of my life. And it takes pretty much priority in the rest of my life. But has anyone not accepted their epilepsy thing or anything about it? Since you guys are all accepted of it?
It's been a difficult one, like not having to wait for the surgery and things like that. That's something that I'm not liking, but and sort of having the daily seizures at the moment, that's something I'm finding really quite hard, and not like struggling to find a reason and sort of coming to terms with why that is. And sort of because I work in a petrol station, because of that, I've now not been, as well as the lockdown, of course, but like because of that, it's not safe for me to go to work. So at the minute, I've been signed off sick for the last 7 weeks, I think it is. So it's just not seeing anyone other than family. It's draining.
It sucks. Let's put it that way. It sucks.
Yeah.
I'm sick of my family. No offense, but
yeah, it is hard. It is very hard.
It's like my family has been very accepting of it. I think at first my mom didn't want to be like, oh my God, there's something seriously wrong. But then now that she's accepted it, it's brought my family close. But does anybody's family give them crap for having epilepsy? Like anybody?
My dad, not necessarily crap, but for the longest time, he was still on, you need to drive, you need to drive, you need to drive, no matter how many times I was like, I cannot drive. And he eventually accepted it when I told him I had a dream that I ran him over with my car. That, I think, clicked, and he was like, oh.
It took that long. He literally used to, the first thing when we get out of a neuro appointment, and I call and say, oh, we're out the neurologist. Okay, when can Grace drive? It's like, she can't.
And it's like I've had it from friends more so than I guess you could say family, where they're like, well, why are you going to your doctor? Well, why are you still taking this med if it's not going away? And I'm like, well, why do people still go to chemo if their cancer can come back? It's like, because I have to. And it's like a lot of people don't accept the fact that, I need to make accommodations for my epilepsy and not just be like, oh yeah, let's hang out today, because I don't care, that's not going to happen. So
my family has opinions about it that are kind of very ignorant, because they find that my epilepsy is provoked maybe by me being a drug user or some type of, I don't know, like flu type of thing, and they blame it on me. Like they see the seizures, but they believe that it's just seizures caused by like a overdose or something.
So they have like the stereotypical judgmental take on it, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Like seeing me have seizures like out of the blue, like when I'm completely, you can tell that I'm not overdosed,
Yeah.
Completely coherent, and all of a sudden I just fall, and I have a grand mal seizure, and they think that it just looks too much like something they've seen on ER type of thing,
Mm-hmm.
An overdose. They use movies like based it on like, oh, this person when they were. Have you ever seen Pulp Fiction?
Oh yeah, I love
Like,
Quentin
you
Tarantino.
know when she takes the line of heroin and then she starts foaming in the mouth and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they think it's something like that. Like I put myself
Oh
something in
yeah.
my body to make it myself get it.
I
Yeah.
think before I've had epilepsy, that's kind of what I thought a seizure was at first. Before I learned what it all was, and then I was diagnosed and started learning everything.
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of us went through that, like where
Mm-hmm.
we were, you know, everyone thought it was the flashing light thing. We all thought it was the grand malls. And then it's like, oh, wow, I feel really bad that I'm like, oh, it has to do with drugs, you know, because that's not the case at all. But, you know, I wish people would accept that it's real and not something that I'm just like faking for attention or like,
Yeah.
I'm a drug addict, because it's like the only thing I've touched is weed, you know. It's like that's not gonna make me have a seizure. So I don't drink, so I'm not an alcoholic, I'm not withdrawing. So I wish they would just accept that I'm not possessed, you know, something like that.
It's always good when they accept that.
Yeah, it's
I
like
have
before my. Oh, sorry.
no, I've had people like message me and say recently that their families still think they're possessed, like this week. I'm like, what?
No.
Yeah. I was like, what in the hell? Like, what church do you go to, guys?
Wow.
Yeah. So sorry, whoever I cut off.
No, I hadn't started talking, but I was like, before my surgery, my family was like really accepting, and then now after, like, that's my surgery, like, we knew I had multiple focal points, so like I was gonna it was gonna cut them down, but I was still gonna have seizures. But now, like, they don't want to accept that, like, I am still having them, like, and that we knew this, and so they just are like, they'll say I'm faking them, or that, like, I'm lying to my doctor. Like, I had a virtual visit, and then right after we hang up, they'll be like, you're lying, you're faking them, like, you're not having them, those aren't, like, and it's just like, you see
Oh,
me.
yeah. What kind of surgery did you have?
I had a right temporal lobectomy.
Oh, ouch.
But
But
yeah, I have like 3 focal points, so we knew I was gonna be having them still.
I've noticed a lot of people that have gone through surgery. Like, I've gone through surgery myself, and right now I don't have seizures, thankfully, but I know there's a chance that they won't stop just because I've had surgery. And I feel like a lot of people are like, why'd you even do the surgery if they're not going to stop? And I'm like, well, because this is the best option I have to get them reduced. And that's better to me than, you know, being all over the place, seizing all the time. And I feel like a lot of people won't accept surgery if they don't think it's going to work 100%. And I think that's a bad decision personally. But
Were yours getting
For
like
me,
worse and worse too as you got older?
oh yeah, mine would,
Same.
they thought it was migraines initially. Then they were like, oh, maybe you do have right temporal lobe epilepsy. Then they're like, you only have absence seizures. Then more EEGs came and they're like, oh no, you have complex partials. Then we did the final one and like, they're like, oh, you have grand mals too. Like, oh, and catamenial
Oh, wow.
epilepsy. But I'm like, okay, so they're not migraines after all, guys, are they?
It's like, Yeah, for me it was more like I always kind of knew something was wrong, because I would have I would just space out all the time. And so we were like, for a really long time, like years, we were like, oh, she's spacey. Like, I had a teacher nickname me Spacey Gracie for a while. So I would just space out, and then so I kind of had like a hunch that something was wrong. So when they were like, oh, you have epilepsy, for me it was kind of more like, well, at least I have an answer now. Like, it didn't really take too long for me to just be like, oh, okay, like, at least I know what's causing this, at least I know that you know what it is.
Yeah.
For me, the acceptance wasn't as hard as I think it was for like my dad, for him being like, oh, she'll never drive, oh, they'll never go away. For me, I was just like, okay, this is my life.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
I
with
brought,
regards to like,
oh, sorry.
go on, Brie. It's fine. No, go on.
No, you go ahead. I was reading something and I almost said it out loud, so I can't multitask.
like with regards to like the Spacey Gracie thing that you said a minute ago, it's like all the way through like primary school, I was classed as a daydreamer all the way from like the age of 6. I think it was, right the way through. And it got to the point that teachers would actually be up in my face trying to get my attention, like clicking in my face. And I'd just be sat there staring out the window. And nothing would even pull my attention back. And it's like, I don't think they were, unless there was the physical diagnosis, they wouldn't accept that something was wrong, even though they were almost happening on an almost daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And it's like I wasn't diagnosed until I was, I think, 16.
I was 17.
I was 19.
And
I was 19.
like, I think now I'm on my 7th or 8th different medication combination.
Ooh.
And it's still not working.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I
Josh,
mean-
I have to tell you real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No.
I've had epilepsy for over 25 years and I've tried 30 different medications. And I
Wow.
talked to my neurologist yesterday and he wants me to change out one of them, even though I'm mostly seizure free, because one of them that I'm taking is actually a rescue medicine. And so if I did need a rescue, that I wouldn't be able to have that. So unfortunately, be patient. And another thing I would say when we talked about acceptance, my mom's biggest thing was I had a really hard time finding a doctor that would listen and would do like something that was helpful. And so that would make her so mad. Well, clearly it made me mad too. But you know, she was like, you need to work harder on that.
Yeah, I've gotten that where people are like, well, you used to be so productive. Why are you just like, you know, hanging out in bed? Why aren't you doing this? And like, they don't accept that. It's like, you know, I kind of need to just chill in bed today. You know, I can't, you know, sorry, but they don't accept that I'm not being lazy. I'm being mindful of my disability, but they're just, you know, they're so quick to judge that it's like, oh, well, you do nothing. Like Grace said, when you date somebody, they're just like, you're boring, you know, like you don't go out of the house, you can't drive, why don't you do this, why don't you live by yourself? And it's like, you know, they don't think, oh, maybe something might be wrong. They're like, oh, you're a piece of crap that works at McDonald's, you know, like that's what they think, and it sucks.
Yeah, I feel like the biggest issue with acceptance for us, I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone, but from hearing what I've heard, I think a lot of people don't have too much trouble in general with their families. I think friends eventually accept it, but I'd say society in general is what we really have trouble with accepting us. Like,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for Josh's situation, I think that's that's education for teachers. You know, when you can't get someone's attention, when they're spaced out and they don't respond when you're right there, you know, they just don't understand. Most of us didn't understand. I didn't know until Grace had her diagnosis. But
Mhm.
that's something where, you know, the more we're out there, hopefully the more people will have an understanding of what it is, so that teacher won't make the same mistake, you know, again with the kid.
Yeah, hopefully.
Well, my daughter has
That's what we can help,
ADHD.
and that's, you know, something we're all called to do, I think, you know.
My daughter has ADHD and she does the same stuff until she got on medication. She couldn't focus. So they also were like, okay, they called attention to us and said, you know, like, by the way, she's not paying attention. And, you know, is this medical or whatever? But, you know, I didn't know because I wasn't at school.
But with ADHD, if someone comes up to you and says your name right in front of your face, you respond, right?
For the most part, but you might
as
get
opposed
upset.
as opposed to a seizure where you don't even see the
Right.
person, you're not responding
It
at all.
scares you. So imagine you're like having a really hard time focusing, and then all of a sudden somebody comes up to you, you're like, you know, because you
Right.
are just really trying. If there is, I'll equate it to one of my biggest triggers is just too much going on. If I go to the mall or something like that, it's just like I can't deal.
Right.
And that's
Right.
kind of like with the ADHD, trying to make yourself focus.
But for an educator, they should see that difference is all I'm saying.
They should be trained. Yes.
You hope.
See it because, you know, it's not so uncommon that they shouldn't know what it is all I'm saying. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
But if
it
they've
is.
never been trained,
No. And it's sad that they're not trained or it's not required. I wouldn't say you need to be like, oh, this one has cancer, let me be an expert in this one. You're epileptic, let me
Certainly
be an
not.
epileptic. But it's like, you should have a general thing like, oh, if they pass out, are they low on, are they diabetic, or are they
Right.
epileptic?
Yep.
You know, something like that.
Yeah, when I was doing my beginning of the year training, when I was teaching in the school, they did none of that. It was like, if someone's drug overdosing or if someone's having a heart attack, here's what to do. And that's all they pretty much went
Yeah,
over.
they gave you
Or
Narcan training.
if someone
right?
gets a cut, here's what to do. It
Yeah.
wasn't like, if you see this or this. It was like, if it's an emergency, call someone. And I'm like, okay, well, what if like there isn't time for somebody to get here? Someone's having a seizure, you don't really have the 5 minutes it takes for someone to come down and help. You kind of need to know what to do at that moment. But
Well, in certain states, and I think California is one of them, I was telling Bree that it is like illegal if they don't, you know, teach the teachers and the kids in school. However, it's supposed to be done by a licensed professional, and then they're supposed to have somebody on staff that is an expert in it. And so it's been difficult to be like, okay, do all this training. I mean, in my town alone, we have 40 grade schools. So yeah.
I'm not moving there. It's too many kids for me.
I don't have to deal with them. I just have to deal with my own.
Oh my gosh. No, I think ours, they're actually finally in California passing a law where they have to train them. It's on the ballot this year. But before that, a lot of schools, especially my area, were kind of like, I don't know. We don't need to cover that. And like, my mom works at a high school, and there are 15 girls alone that in the senior class that had epilepsy, and like no one knew what to do except for like my mom would run over and they'd be like, why do you know what to do? She's like, because my daughter has this, you know, all this stuff. And like some nurse was like, oh, you need to put like a spoon in her mouth. And I'm like, what?
A nurse said that?
No. That's the one thing you don't do.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm like, I wouldn't even come to you for a Band-Aid now. Like, you just scared the
Wow.
crap out of me.
and the issue for me was I was teaching 5th graders who are, you know, higher, you know, they are able to recognize things more. And I asked the principal when I was teaching, and I said, would it be possible that I just mention this to the kids so if something happens, they can run and get another teacher? Because I was out in a trailer. Like, I didn't have someone there all the time. And she goes, I don't think that's a good idea. And that was just her only response. And then I had kids coming in talking about, you know, all the funny things that they saw about people pretending to have all these disabilities on TikTok. And I wanted to look at these kids and be like, I have epilepsy. Is that funny to you? But no, it's not okay to talk to kids about it. And I'm like, well, the kids are going to find out about someone. Why not have someone that they know
Right.
talk about it?
I had 2 college professors with epilepsy, and that was one of the first things they told us. And I had it, but not, theirs was different. They had different things, different types of seizures. And I was glad they said something because, you know, if number one, if they weren't there, you knew why. And if you witnessed it, the one ran around the room. That was like what she did. She would like, I don't know what it's called, but she would lose like her conscious mind and just would like run around and throw things and whatever. So imagine being in class and seeing somebody do that. And you'd be like, what's going on?
Well, and when I taught health in my 4th grade internship, the teacher that I was with was like, you can do a whole lesson on it while I'm here. Like, ask the principal if it's okay, but you should be able to do it. I did it, and the kids loved it. And they saw, like, you could still do whatever you want, even if you have a disability. And for them, it was like, wow. But here I am asking someone when I'm actually working. They're like, I don't think that's a good idea. And I'm like,
Yeah, and I feel like these younger kids that are coming up, although they look toilet seats sometimes, they're more accepting of people. Like, they are. And it's like, I've had some kid, when they found out that I had epilepsy, I want to say she was like 7 or 8. She's like, oh, I know Cameron Boyce had epilepsy. And I was like, yeah, he did. And I was kind of like surprised. And they're like, oh, do you have it like he does? And I'm like, no, I'm alive. You know, like, I don't want to say that to a kid, but
right.
you know, but I'm like, yeah, kind of, you know. And they're like, oh yeah, that's sad. Like, they know what it is because Disney's behind it now. So it's getting kind of nice where it's like a lot of my friends, then, you know, when I told them I had it or had to get brain surgery, they were like, oh my God, they were freaked out, you know. And I'm just kind of like, Like I've lost lots of friends because of it, because they're I don't know why it scares them, because it's not their freaking brain, but it scares them.
Oh, like no. My mom teaches elementary school, and she told me about some of the students at their school that have epilepsy, and I'm kind of like, but like the faculty, they need to learn what happens if those students have a seizure. And then another friend of mine was telling me the same thing. Like she asked me a couple questions about epilepsy, and I'm kind of like, they need to do the same thing. They need to start learning what happens if those students have a seizure. I'm kind of like, these faculty need to learn, because like it's not happening in South Carolina. Like the faculty members aren't learning what happened.
What part of South Carolina do you live in?
I live in Bishopville. It's kind of near Columbia. It's about 45 minutes from Columbia.
My friend teaches in however you want to say it, Beaufort or Beaufort. So
I know. I sort of know where that is.
She teaches down there, but she even says like she's like they don't teach medical stuff like they should down there, and I think a lot of schools are still doing that. Like
a lot of states don't teach it the way they should, and I think that's another reason why acceptance is so hard, because I feel like if a kid were to have a seizure, even a teacher standing there like, what do I do? Like with that face, like, oh crap. I feel like it's going to make the kids be like, well, obviously it isn't important if the teacher doesn't even know what to do. And I feel like that just keeps kind of going.
Or if the teacher is scared, then the kids are going to be like, oh my God, like what's going on? And it's like, when I was working still, like when I was getting my second master's degree, when I was just doing stupid like retail stuff, they knew going into hiring me that I had epilepsy. I told them, I was like, I can't climb ladders, I can't do this, any of that. Not like I wanted to go get stock for bitchy customers, but it was a good excuse. But I was like, I can't do this, I can't do that, I need to be careful about hours and stuff. And like they were fine with it. Then all of a sudden I brought in my resignation because I got so severe with my epilepsy that they freaked out. They were talking crap about me behind my back to like my friends that worked there. They were when I had a seizure at work, they ran out of the room screaming. They didn't know what to do. They were just like, oh my God. And I'm like, well, good news is I don't have to work here anymore. But work is a really hard one. I've noticed people are afraid that they won't be accepted at work.
I've got that over where I work at the minute. It's like there's absolutely no one that is in the place I work that is first aid trained. No one knows a thing about epilepsy. It's an absolute nightmare.
It's terrifying.
It is. How many people work there?
At the moment it's a petrol station, so when I'm working there's like 2 people, well it's me and one other person on shift, so it's occasionally sort of there's a manager there, but not all the time.
Not always. Yeah.
Every job I've had seizures and people freak out. And then I'm like, okay, well, this is how it is. Like, I'm going to have seizures. They're going to happen. Just don't let me get hurt and call my husband, and that's it. But I mean, in some jobs I didn't work at very long, but you don't sleep that night. You forget your medicine, there's a trigger. It's going to happen. And so, so long as you educate the people that you're with. I mean, I had a seizure at a trade show. And there's a lot of people at a trade show. And you learn that there's many hospitals in every place you go.
Yeah.
So
I've been really lucky with, like, I've worked at 2 places and they have been like super accepting of, like, 2 weeks after my my surgery, they told me I could come back to work.
Oh my goodness.
That's accepting. I had like a grand mal. This is when I was having multiple seizures a day too. And then I had a grand mal. Of course, the night I decided to host in a strapless dress. I have a grand mal. And my boss had to throw a tablecloth over my lower body to help me that way after it, because I was giving everyone
a show.
Yeah, thank you for helping me with everything. But yeah, they like just asked me like what to do when I had like different types of seizures, and they are just like wanted to learn. And a few of the servers were actually nurses too, and first aid trained. So they like have been every time they just welcome me back. Like with,
I'm glad to hear that.
They
though,
know where my rescue med is. They call my mom if she needs to come get me. It's just been awesome.
I might move over to wherever you are, because that sounds amazing.
Right?
It is, and I love like it's right. Yeah, they're amazing.
And it's
I
like some
think you're in the
people are very accepting, but it's like from what I've seen from a lot of people, they get judged. But then that makes me sad. But that's not everybody.
No,
Yeah, I know.
sort
I'm
of.
a super lucky like situation.
right. I have a question for those that apply for a job. Do you write on there, like sometimes it'll say on the application that, do you have any disabilities? And I never put any. And now I have multiple sclerosis too. And so that can impact my job performance. But I don't want them not to hire me because they're like, oh no.
I don't want them to not hire me or feel like they have to hire me because otherwise I'll sue them if they don't. I just wait until after I've been hired, and then if it's a problem, we work out some way to kind of make it work. But
For me, it fluctuates. Depends on what job I want to do. Like I just did that. I got that teaching job, and they're like, "Well, why are you qualified for this position?" I was like, "Well, I'm home 24/7 anyway. Like I'm epileptic. I just had brain surgery. I'm used to online platforms, so that's how I used it that way. But it's not like I'm epileptic and need a job because nobody likes me. Like I don't use that card. That's stupid."
yeah, I did. The one job that I did mention it for was my online teaching job as well, because that's working with kids who have medical problems. And I just said, I have a medical problem too, so I can relate to the kids. I'm always home pretty much. I have a flexible schedule, so I'm able to work with their times.
Exactly. That's what I did, but it's not like I was, like I said, I don't use it. The only places I use it as like I need this, I want this, is if I'm going to get better seating at a concert. I'm like, or board a plane early. I'm like, yo, epileptic right here. Let's go. But,
How convenient, right?
See,
yeah.
I know for me, when it comes to applying for jobs, we don't have to put anything with regards to disabilities, anything at all. We don't have to mention.
Yeah.
So I know when I applied for a job in a restaurant working behind a bar, I didn't say a word to them, and then decided to have a big tonic clonic and smashed my head into the glass washing machine. Which was nice.
I think I remember that photo.
Yeah, there's another one where I face planted a concrete wall as well, which was nice.
Been there,
But,
lost all these.
It happens.
Yeah,
it happens.
Well,
It's one of them
nobody
things, unfortunately.
Nobody can say we're not tough.
No,
yeah,
exactly.
Remember, I had a loss.
Exactly.
I really hurt myself, and I came into work the next day, and I'd gotten 8 staples in my head because I took out a piece of my kitchen wall. And he's like, "Boy, she's tough," and I'm like, "I need to make money if I don't show up."
Yeah, I have a friend who I was working with when we were doing catering one time, and I had a 10-minute absence seizure where I was making funnel cakes, and I'd make the funnel cake and then just drop it in the trash. And I did that like 10 times. I just made them and dropped them in the trash. People were at the window like, excuse me.
You're like the.
And
That's
then
brilliant.
she was at a grand mall, and she fell backwards, hit her head and shoulders on a concrete floor.
Oh
That
my
happened to me. I fell face forward on the concrete, and I fallen because I was having 30 to 60 seizures a day. And the thing is that they couldn't know, nobody knew why it was happening until one of my primary care doctor was giving me a certain medication, which was contraindicating with my seizure medication. It took my neurologist, who knows me since I was 14 years old, to be able to analyze why I could barely walk. I was shaking all the time. It was like I was about to have a seizure every second. So I fell, and I fell so many times that they took me to the emergency room on one seizure because I wasn't coming back and I wasn't breathing. My oxygen level was so low. So when I go, the cops show up. The cops walk in, and I'm like, why are the cops here? And they told my parents, get out of the room. And they told me, be honest. Are you just saying that you have epilepsy to protect someone who is abusing you? Or just let us know who is abusing you, because this looks more than just epilepsy. This looks like somebody is beating you seriously.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
had, because I bruised so badly, you know, because I'm very light skinned and I bruise and it takes forever to heal. So I had to, like, I told him, look, call my neurologist. He's seen me fall in his office, you know, he's seen me. And I had to, like, swear to them, basically take an oath in front of them, you know, and had to sign papers that I wasn't getting abused by my parents. But it was like such an insult because it's on my record, you know, I'm you know, I'm legally disabled. And they knew this, and why did the doctors call the cops? Like, I was
In that same respect, though,
They're
in that same
mandated
respect,
to
though,
report.
at least they were sort of prepared to take that step and sort of make sure that you were okay.
Yeah, because some doctors are like, you're just a paycheck, bye.
Yeah.
But it's like,
felt like very insulting to, like, wait, this was when my mother was alive. She passed away, and this was when my mom was alive, and my mom was the one that always brought me back. Like, she would always be like, come back, Kate, come back, come back, come back, wake up, come back to me, my little girl, come back to me. And for them to even accuse my mom of abuse, it hurt me. It hurt me so much because they already felt abused by the illness itself, you know, and taking a toll on them. And then to get suspected of abusing your child when you're seeing your child basically every 5 seconds fall down on the floor and seize, and to the point that my father one day bent down and he was just like, God, inflict this pain on me. Don't do it on my child. Don't do it on my baby.
God,
And it just it hurt. It hurt. It was really hurtful. Because if they would have just called my neurologist, it would have taken a 5-minute call instead of calling the cops. They could have just called my neurologist. My neurologist would have confirmed my diagnosis instead of them asking me, you know, are you just making up this epilepsy thing? That, I mean, I have EEGs, the video EEGs, you know. I've stayed at the sleep observation centers, and you know, I've been in the hospital, been recorded, and it's just, I guess the fact that I haven't had surgery, they don't think about it like, well, it can't be that bad if she doesn't have surgery, you know, because they're right away they say, you know, do you have any surgeries for epilepsy? I'm like, no, I haven't, thank God I haven't had to do it, you know. But I'm like, if it was necessary, I would do it. But I'm like, you know, and they're like, so are you sure you have it? And I'm like, do you not understand that my first seizure was when I was 2 years old. I had febrile seizures. Then they turned into tonic-clonics, and since then they've been tonic-clonics. And I think the other night I had a nocturnal seizure for I don't know. I then through 17 to 21 I had absence seizures, and everybody thought that it was my PTSD acting up, that I would like disassociate, until my neurologist found out that he saw that I was. They would be like, "Why do you stare so much? Why are you staring? You know, it's rude to stare at people." And I'm like, I don't notice that I'm staring. And like, it's just some people just don't get it. Like, they, no matter, like, I try to get even my family to watch Brain on Fire, and they were like, what are we gonna watch a girl with epilepsy for? We already have you in the family to be or seeing this awful stuff. We don't want to see an awful movie. And I'm just like, it's for you to be more educated about, maybe things might make sense to you that, coincide with my symptoms,
I
And
feel like a lot of people just don't want to like accept things, and it's like I feel like they have to. Sometimes people need that the shock factor before they accept things. I feel like, I feel like they need to hit that. I don't want to say rock bottom, but rock bottom before it like, before they're willing to accept it, because like it says, like the bargaining part of it, where it's like, oh well, I can still function, I can still do this, and there's like, so it can't be that bad. Well, they had surgery for their epilepsy, so I can't be that bad type of thing. But I don't believe that's the case. I think that's just us making excuses for why we don't want to feel bad about what we have. And same with family, like it's denial because they don't want to feel that burden or that guilt. I think like it was like when I first got diagnosed, my mom was like, oh no, that's not a seizure, she's just kind of groggy when she wakes up. And my brother was like, no, that's a seizure, I'm pretty positive she doesn't just slump, people don't just slump over. And like my brother is, Nancy and Grace knows him, he's loud and likes to give his opinion about everything, but he was right this time. And so like it was a thing that I think everyone had to come to terms with, was like, oh, this is real. And like for me, I came to terms with it when it started getting worse. And then I was kind of like, okay, like at first I was like, I had a seizure, okay, type of thing. And then I was like, okay, I'm having a seizure every single month, I'm having to take meds every single day, I've had it for 11 years now, like this is not going to get better. And then it got to the point where they're like, we want to do further testing to see if you need something other than meds. And I was like, this just got real. Like this is when it hit me. I was like, okay, it's like, this is a really serious thing I have now. It's not just I daydream. And I think that's how my mom was too. My mom was kind of like, oh crap, like, here come, this is real. This is like a legitimate, like she probably has to live with me until she gets married, be on my insurance till she gets married, type of thing. And I'm still there. But that part I've had the hardest time accepting, is the fact that I need help from everybody. That's been the hardest one for me.
Yeah, like the diagnosis itself, I pretty much like right away I was like, okay, like I said, because it was like I had a 20-minute long complex partial seizure, an absent seizure. That was pretty much the reason that we were like, oh, something's wrong. And I went to the hospital. And, nobody at the hospital really wanted to say exactly what it was. They were like, it could be a stroke or it could be this. And, you hear stroke and you're like, oh my God.
Well, people, I'm sorry, Grace, keep going.
Oh, so it was one of those, I went and got the MRI with contrast, and then you go to the neurologist's office where they tell you everything they treat. And it's like tumor, stroke, epilepsy, you could die, like everything on the wall. So I'm sitting there like, okay, like, and so it's like it wasn't a stroke and it wasn't a tumor, and like that was kind of when I was like, okay. So for me, it was more like when he first said epilepsy, I was like, okay, well the good news is it's not a stroke.
It's not a tumor.
Yes, thank you. It's not a tumor or a stroke. It was like a little bit easier for me to hear epilepsy at the time. So I didn't really need time to let it sink in, but it was really when, people were looking at apartments in college and going away, and I was kind of home like, well, I can't really live somewhere where it's loud and I can't sleep, and people are up late drinking all the time because I can't drink and I can't do this. So like college is when it really hit me. Like senior year of high school wasn't so much, but college, it was like, okay, I'm not the same as everyone else.
Yeah. It started hitting me about, like, because I got diagnosed right before my 20s, and like for some reason my graduating class decided to get knocked up and married like the day after we graduated, all of them. So I was the only one that didn't, and I'm like, wow, you guys got like 4 kids and I just got a new medicine, yay. So
oh, don't you guys feel like,
right?
Sorry, Jamie, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, I feel like I would have love to have some sort of like BTW, this is epilepsy, this is what you need to know. And that didn't happen. So that when I was having these other seizures, I didn't even know that they were seizures. I didn't even know to tell the doctor. And when I found out I had multiple sclerosis, they were much better about like, here's what it is, here's the medications. But I don't feel like I got that with epilepsy. And I was diagnosed at 18 too. And none of my friends accepted it. And by the way, I had 5 girls that were pregnant at my graduation. But that's what I really wish, is that there was like, no book is going to tell you for sure, but just that you had something that you could, a reference, that you didn't have to Google things and WebMD, because WebMD is not what you want to
Wikipedia.
Google.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like the nature of epilepsy is such that seizures can be so different. There are so many different kinds of seizures, and it's so difficult to nail down. It's like, trying to nail Jello against a wall. I think everybody goes through that. I mean, we wouldn't have known that Grace's seizures, a lot of the time she was having seizures, I didn't know they were seizures yet. She didn't. Even once we got her on medication, she would get really nauseous, and then she'd get really tired. And I thought that her medication was taking her to the point where, maybe I'm going to get a seizure and the medication would stop it and she wouldn't have a seizure. I had no idea that was actually a seizure. And I never would have called her neurologist to say, she's getting really nauseous all the time and really tired. I wouldn't have called about that.
No,
I just
and we
wouldn't
made that
have.
same mistake
But-
with me.
Yeah, I worked with the neurologist's wife, so I would see her at work, and I'd say, yeah, and she'd ask how Grace is doing. I'd say, well, she's getting really tired all the time, and I don't know what's going on with that. I wouldn't have bothered him. He's a busy, busy guy, But she would go home and tell her husband, and then he'd call me. It's like, what's going on with Grace? And it would have been 8 o'clock at night. He's calling me, and I would tell him, and it was a lot of conversation with him on a level that I think most people probably don't have with a neurologist.
No,
or
and
they're
I
not going to
tell
bother their
I
neurologist.
tell mine everything, like probably more than she cares to know now. I was like, oh, like in my seizure chart, I'm like, had eggs for breakfast today at 6:30. She's like, I don't care. She's
We
like,
do
I
a
just
lot of
want to
that
know if you've
now.
had a
My
seizure.
We
my
did a lot of that
neurologist
now, but
is-
initially we didn't,
I don't
My
either.
neurologist right now is, when I met him, he was already an older man, and imagine I've been with him since I was 14, and now he's pretty old, and I'm afraid that once, because he has a very high reputation, he's one of the most like prestigious neurologists in New York City. I'm scared that the day that the inevitable happens, I will lose all support on the fact how he defends me. Like, I'll go to an emergency room for a seizure, and the first thing that residents come in with the attending, and they want to change all my medications, like Keppra, take this, take that. Are you sure that
emergency room physicians want to do that?
the ER physicians?
Get
And
out.
And I've told, and they've had to call at 3 a.m. They call my neurologist, and my neurologist, he says, I don't care if you call me, you tell them to call me at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in the morning. I don't care. I'm there for you. I've known you since a little girl, and I'm scared, like, when he's not there, who's going to voice for me? Like, I'm going to have to form a relationship with a new neurologist that is not going to know me, like, hasn't seen the worst,
Mhm.
Yeah, like when
That's
I
a whole
first
nother,
got
that could be a whole nother topic, is just relationships with your neurologist, because I think they're critical. I mean, really key to your care.
Yeah, I
And there's
do
a whole
too.
psychology behind that too. You're so dependent upon them, because they keep us afloat, right?
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
And they
like,
really do.
I had to switch one because I was with the same one for about 8 years, and he was just a neurologist, and my seizures would progressively get worse and worse and worse. And like, we made the same mistake of telling him only on our 3-month appointments how many seizures I had up to that 3 months. I didn't know anybody else. And I'd write them all down. I'd tell him, and he's like, why aren't you calling me? Finally, he's like, why aren't you telling me when it happens? I'm like, I thought that's why we met every 3 months. Like, you know, like I didn't know. I'm like,
Okay, you wanted an update?
yeah, I was like, I didn't know. I was like, I know you see people with like, you know, everything else with, you know, dementia. I was like, I didn't think I was that high on the scale. But one day he came to me, he's like, you know what, I have to tell you, he's like, after going over your EEG, I want to tell you, I am just a neurologist. I am not an epileptologist. You need to go to UCLA. And I was like, what? Like a doctor just conceded to me? Like, what?
Yeah.
This does
I don't
not
know,
happen.
I'm not God.
No,
Yeah,
right.
I just forgot what I was going to say. It was in my head and then it left me. Continue talking and it might come back.
But that's I think is essential, is to also accept that your doctor is not God. So if you don't get along with your doctor, or, you know, they're not omnipotent, they don't know everything,
Right.
they're not, you know, if you don't gel with them, bye, you know, someone else can
You need somebody
prescribe
to communicate
Keppra.
with.
That, and a
Yeah.
lot of times I'd say also, like, you can talk to doctors about who they recommend in the same practice. Like, because I was at Hopkins for my peds doctor, and he was like, you know what, I want you to see the doctor that you saw when you were in the monitoring unit. Like, I think you would mesh really well with her for an adult doctor. And I was like, well, you know, I don't know. But she and I, like, we're pretty much like this. And she has me, you know, every time I need to take an emergency med, she's like, message me with your seizure log up until that point. So again, it's like keeping that contact. I don't want to call her and bother her, but like message her online and send what I have, and then she can look at it and make adjustments and stuff.
And like most of you guys know, I have a whole team, and it was accepting the fact that this is not just a one doctor treatment. It's going to take an entire, like, I mean, for me anyway, I have a neurosurgeon, I have an epileptologist, I have a neurologist, I have a primary care doctor, I have a neuropsychiatrist, I have a therapist. Like, and it's not just like, you know, it wasn't just one, because epilepsy is more than just seizures. Like, people need to realize that it's not just, I'm having a seizure, so I'm epileptic. It's like, you can have a seizure and not be epileptic, and you can also have other symptoms and still be epileptic. So it was a big, like, bend the knee, I guess you can say, for me to need so many doctors and so much help. I was kind of like, man, there's a lot screwed up with me right now, you know, like, I feel like crap, but at the same time, I'm like, at least they fixed it. You know, it's like, once I got to that point where I was like, you know what, this sucks, but I have someone that has the answers, hopefully, to what's going on with me. And it's like, then, and I feel like a lot of people need to accept that they're not alone. And it's like, I'm glad my doctors forced me to make my page, because it's like, look how many freaking people I discovered are epileptic in the world. And I'm so excited, because
It's huge.
I thought I was alone. For the longest time. Probably about the first, I want to say, what was it, 8 to 9 years I had epilepsy. I didn't think anybody else had it. And I thought, I was like, oh, you know, what's wrong with me? I'm, you know, cursed, you know, who knows, like, type of thing. I was like, why am I so unlucky? But now I think people are getting more accepting of opening up about it. And I think that's really, really key. I just wish the people that, you know, like I say, I guess I can use Cameron Boyce or Prince or somebody that had the platform and the disability would have done it. I wish they would have done it, not once they died and that was their legacy. I wish they would have done it, so people would think like, oh, you know, not everybody's untouchable. It's not just me, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's my hope for 2020 on, is that people talk about it.
Yeah. Well, I think a huge thing is being a self-advocate. And, you know, like when I talked to my doctor yesterday and he's like, hey, BTW, we're going to switch one of your medicines, okay? And, you know, because I've had this for so long, I'm like, all right, is there a way to monitor if I'm therapeutic? What are the side effects? What are the drug interactions? And I only know this because it's happened before. And I hate changing medicines. But I've always been on a cocktail, and that's what he says. You know, you're a current cocktail, and you know, so I just am aware. And if you don't advocate for yourself, if you just trust that they're God, you know, I think it's harder for somebody.
They're humans. Like, at the end of the day, they're humans that went to school for 14 plus years. The end. They didn't they didn't rise from the grave, then become Jesus reincarnated. Like, they are humans, they make mistakes. And if people have different opinions. So if you're like, I don't like this drug just because you said so, it makes me feel like crap. And then be like, okay, there's tons of other freaking drugs that are the same idea.
Yes.
Yeah, so along with
Yeah.
acceptance, like
Like
you
it-
don't have to accept every single thing your doctors tell you.
No.
I would say, like, I was on a med that gave me terrible insomnia, and I went from having 10 seizures a week to 10 seizures a day, and it got to the point where I messaged my doctor and I was like, I need to switch medications.
Yeah, that was me and Kepra. I told my doctor when I got to UCLA, he's like, what are you on? I said, Kepra, and he's all, and I said, same, my face too, like, same, dude, like, I agree. And he's like, we're done. And I'm like, okay. And like, I've become more vocal. Like, you know, I used to be like, okay, this is my doctor, I should respect what they say, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yes, I should respect what they say. I'm going to seek treatment from them. But at the same time, they don't live with me 24/7 or in my body. So
Exactly.
what I tell them, they're going to make an educated guess on, let's put it that way. I mean, it's a guess, pretty much. It's a practice. It's medical, is they're practicing.
They are practicing medicine. Absolutely. There's a
It's
reason I call
practice. So it's, you know, what works for one person may not work for somebody else. And if you want to try something, or if you want a second opinion, you should go get it. It's
Yes.
rather than them being like, oh, we're going to cut your head open. For me, I was like, I'm down. You know, it took a year and a half, 2 years to do it. And I was like, to go through all the testing. And I was like, okay, I have full faith in this. I'll do it. But if I was questioning it, I'd be like, you know what? I'm going to go see a different neurosurgeon or something and see, like, maybe they want to do a different type of surgery or something, or they want to try keto or something, which no thank you, but you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
Like after my surgery, I had a high, like I was not feeling right. Like I knew they weren't, like I wasn't having seizures, but something was off. And they took me into the EMU though. They wanted me to do a stay. And it was not my epileptologist though that was in, it was another doctor. And he came in and he just was like anxiety, and he wouldn't listen to me or anything I had to say. And I knew it wasn't anxiety. I'm like sitting on the couch at home and watching Friends, and my eyes would roll back, I would pass out, like, and I'm like, unless I have a crush on Chandler, why is my heart rate pretty high?
Chandler.
Like, well, it turns out a year later now I have a hormone imbalance. Like, they think like I have POTS from my surgery, like hyperadrenergic POTS, and they're looking at a few other things. So like
You have POTS for your surgery?
Yep, I have POTS from my hyperadrenergic POTS from my surgery and a few other issues, all because
I had no idea
they
that
think
surgery could cause POTS.
they can't, like, a lot of my doctors, because as we said, we all have a team of doctors.
Right,
My
yeah.
doctors say that they can't, like, prove it's from the surgery, but they think it is. But also I have a hypothalamic hamartoma, the lesion on my hypothalamus, so they think like it correlates to each
Right.
you know, but
Don't
Right.
we all sound so educated when we talk about
they look
diagnosis?
like to people that
Hypothalamus
don't know
diagnosis, you
seizures, they
know?
look like seizures. What'd you say?
So we all sound so freaking educated, like scientifically, when we talk about a diagnosis. I'm like, bilateral idiopathic epilepsy. Like, they're like, huh?
And your vagus nerve, and
Yeah. I was like, I wish, so like my major in college was kinesiology, and I started having seizures when I was 19, and it's like, why, like, couldn't have, I had learned all this knowledge, like, when I was taking anatomy class, and of course I was on Topamax taking anatomy class, so I had to retake it.
Sorry, like I said, I've taken 30 medicines.
I'm up there too.
Did they call it Dopamax?
Yeah.
Dopamax.
Yes.
Yeah,
You're skinny as be all, but otherwise sorry.
So
But you're a dumb skinny. Let's put it that way. You are like a walking Paris Hilton. No. I'd rather be fat and intelligent than dumb and stupid skinny.
Yeah, that medication.
I said
I
I'd
asked
rather be chubby
my
and no
epileptologist, get me off of this medication. I cannot do it.
Could not. Like, it was like I'd be watching like Disney movies and I'd be like drooling. I'd be like, I don't understand this. You know, like, it's bad, okay? Like, so bad. But like, I think we're probably gonna work on a thing where it's like you said, I wish I knew this before. Like I want to. I'm sure Grace and Jamie and everybody else will want to help me because I talk to them 24/7. But like a care package or like a manual of what I wish I freaking knew when I got my diagnosis. Like I wish someone was there to tell me like certain things rather than having to learn them over the course of a decade.
Well, I think a lot of doctors, and not just neurologists, but a lot of doctors will stage information for you. They don't think that you're capable of handling it. And frankly, I think a lot of people sitting in a doctor's office don't hear a lot of what a doctor's saying anyway. But like I know when my other daughter, so Grace has her epilepsy. I know when my other daughter she was 5 and she started having asthma symptoms. And I remember they kind of drop the word and then they drop it again. And maybe the third or fourth visit, even though they know she has asthma, they're not going to tell a parent your kid has asthma because yikes, right?
Yeah.
And I know, and I also know with like trauma medicine, if someone has an accident and they're, in a trauma unit, the doctors give you little bits of information at a time, and so it's not unique to epilepsy is what I'm saying. Like I have a nephew who was
Like
in a car accident, he has a spinal cord injury. And when he was in the hospital, a lot of it's, they give you little pieces of information. And in that situation, you have like a whole family sitting in a trauma unit, and everybody can start researching, and it happens with all sorts of cases. And I think that neurology is especially, I think epilepsy is especially difficult to pinpoint lots of times. And
I feel like
there's a ton of information that we all should have. Like
umbrella.
Yes.
Exactly. Like who knew there were so many kinds of seizures when you're first, and who knew that your seizures were going to change,
and who knows how many other seizures are there that they haven't given a label yet.
Or like so many people don't know about SUDEP until like someone that they know dies, and then they learn about it. And they're like, I didn't even
doctor told me,
oh my gosh, to go on like
the epilepsy,
to go on the Epilepsy Foundation, website, and so they might make a post, and I haven't done it for a long time, but for a while I would go through the comment sections, and it was extraordinary to me. Heartbreaking. It's extraordinary to me how heartbreaking some of these comments were. There's so many people out there who don't even have a decent neurologist or don't have a neurologist at all. Oh my God. And they're floundering, and they're suffering, and they're floundering, and they don't have information, and it's really really heartbreking.
I know where to get it.
Put out there to help people.
And it's like when I went to Disneyland for the epilepsy convention that they hold annually. I don't know if it's going to be this year, but there was a wall that it's like the Cure Epilepsy. I think it's a UK organization. I'm pretty sure they're based out of the UK. But they specifically are a research team that researched the cure for epilepsy. And there was like right on this wall, like on this piece of paper, like what a cure for epilepsy would mean to you. So I wrote them, and then I read this entire wall. I was bawling my eyes out reading some of them.
Heartbreaking.
They're so heartbreaking.
Spend an hour dropping down through those comments on anything the Epilepsy Foundation posts, and it's just heartbreaking.
I was like, it would make my life easier, and it would blah 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 type of thing, because like I'm kind of at the acceptance point. But there was stuff in like little kids' handwriting where they were like, so I can fit in school and like all this stuff. And I was just like, oh my God.
Well, like also the walk in DC, the National Walk, has like a SUDEP wall where people write stuff like in memory of people, and I sit there and I read it and I'm crying like little kids handwriting, like I miss you daddy, and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, or someone's like, so I don't have to bury my second child and all this stuff, and I'm like, like this is, and it's like I wanted to take pictures of it and be like, look, for all you idiots making videos on the internet, do you think this is funny?
Well, FYI about
Cure,
they're actually located in Chicago, and I'm in Chicago area. They are only focused on research. That's all they do. And then like the Epilepsy Foundation as a whole, I've talked to them quite a bit. They focus on programs, and not places are not as good as others. They try to mimic each other, but
the ones in California suck. I'll call them out right now. Orange County, San Diego, Los Angeles, get your crap together. You suck.
But it is a big misconception that when people donate, they're donating to research, and they're not. Unless they're donating to research places like even Johns Hopkins or anything like that. So what they're actually donating to is programs
For the
that,
Epilepsy
programs.
Foundation?
yes.
Yeah.
It's important too, though, because a lot of people need a lot of support. And man, they're not getting it. A lot of people.
No.
You know?
Well, like the neighborhood my parents moved into, like in Florida, like I forget, like a couple 4 years ago, our neighbors on the street, they started a support group called Josh Provides because they lost their son to SUDEP. And it has been just, helped me find my epileptologist, who has been just the most, at Cleveland Clinic, has been just the most awesome thing ever. Like, and they just have been like, an awesome thing. Like
I feel
that.
it's
Like,
more like people that have like their personal goals to make it a mission that are more successful in helping people rather than like charities and organizations run by, you know, volunteers and stuff like that. And it's like, I mean, you know, thanks for doing what you're attempting to do and stuff, but it's like, I don't think many of them have epilepsy, fully understand it, you know what I mean? And it's like, cool, you want me to donate $26 today, you wanted me to do that 3 times yesterday, you know, it's like, put some info out.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like that's my dream.
Yeah, they don't really have the history. Like, are you saying like the history?
They don't
Well,
have. From what I see from the foundations, they mostly repost like stories that it's like, I've been seizure free for a year. And then the next post will be like, donate $26 so you can help this person. And it's like, they don't do anything but that. And it's like, people are like, okay, I get it. You haven't had a seizure. We don't want to donate money. Like, no one's going to pay attention after a while. You know,
The nice
people want
thing,
information. I think a lot of people want information. They're not getting it from those sources.
Well,
they're not.
if you're not already like following Cure, what they actually give out a lot of grants, and then they'll say what the grant's doing, background about the person, then they'll give you an update about maybe new medications coming out. And so from the research perspective, like I'm more curious in that than what the foundation is doing. And I know a lot of people at the foundation by me. I don't know as many at Cure because they're very like smart. I don't know how else to put it. But it is a really good newsletter and really good to follow because it really gives you hope. You know, you read about something and you're like, oh man, I really hope this works.
Yeah, and that's totally fine with me. And it's like I was annoying and stopped at literally every single like vendor at the Disneyland place because why not? But it's like there are a lot of research organizations that are coming together, specifically that are research, and they're like, well, we need to find out. Like they think there's like 100 genes I think that are associated with epilepsy so far, and they're trying to narrow down what those genes are and if they overlap and all this stuff. And so they're getting there. It's just then we take 12 steps backwards with these morons on, you know, TikTok. But
I now have
I saw some of those videos and they are so
and
frustrating.
I think it's fantastic, and I make jokes about the idiots.
Yeah, and it's like the form of acceptance I've done is like I have a very dark sense of humor, as if you don't see my page all the time, right? But that's how I've accepted it. I've kind of made it into, I don't want to say made a joke out of it, but made a joke out of it because it's like, you know, like I'll wake up and like, oh, had a seizure. Well, didn't pee myself. That's a good plus, you know, like stuff like that. And people get really offended. And I'm like, take your miserable ass somewhere else then, I guess, you know, but it's like everyone comes to acceptance in their own way. But it's like I went to counseling and I went to therapy. And then I was like, you know what? Epilepsy is not going to change how I've dealt with every other situation in my life. You know, it's like I'm going to laugh about it.
Yeah, humor helps me so much.
Yep.
It's like it's like, no, it's not funny to pretend to have a seizure or make fun of someone having a seizure. That is a completely different thing. That is being an insensitive jackass. But if you can laugh about the fact that you can't form a word and you have to play a game of charades to get the point across of what you want to eat for lunch, that's funny. You know, like
Laughter's the best medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Or brain fog since my surgery. The things that come out of my mouth cause such good laughs
Like, same, because the anesthesia really, really, really messed with me. And like, I kept joking around, like trying to call my dog. I'd be like, come here, homie. Like, you know, just saying, like, come here, buddy. And I would accidentally say, come here, homo. And I was like, oh my God. And it's like, and I'm like, I've never said that word in my life. Stuff that like fall out of my mouth. I was like,
Oh yeah, after surgery, I called my dad and my uncle when they were like trying to see how I was doing. The nurse asked me, "Who are these two gentlemen?" I said, "Oh, those two fuckers." Yeah, apparently that's what the answer that came out of my mouth after surgery. I was just like,
your honesty.
I laugh because my kids will say, just give her a minute and she'll come to. Like, I'm like, all right.
My sister and my mom joke about it because they're home. And I'm like, you know, the thing with the, you know, and I'm sitting there and they just stare at me. Eventually they're like, milk? And I'm like, yes. And they're like,
yeah, exactly. My
Duh.
poor boyfriend, he's like, what do you want for dinner? I'm like, that stuff that we had that one time. He's like, oh, you're so helpful. I'm like, you know, the edible stuff. That's where I'm going.
I'm like, the thing with the thing. And they're like, that's not helpful at all. And I'm like, you know what I'm talking about. That's what I get frustrated over. It's not even having seizures anymore. It's the seizure brain that pisses me off. And I'm like, the thing with the thing. And they're like, saying it louder isn't helpful.
Mr. Krabs, that smelly smell.
Yep. Smelly smell that smells smelly.
Yes.
I talk out loud to myself now, and like I don't realize I'm talking out loud to myself, and it's not very coherent talking out loud to myself. And people next to me will be like just give me the weirdest looks, like, what the hell are you talking
like,
about?
what are you? It's like, I do that too. I'll read someone's text message or something, and then what I want to say back to them, I'll make myself laugh and say it out loud as I'm typing it. Everyone's like,
at least I'm not the only one who does that.
Like, at least
see, that's why I got a dog so that people didn't think I was crazy when I was talking to myself. I'm like, I'm really talking to the dog.
You're talking to the dog, of course.
People think I'm crazy because I speak to my dog in full sentences like she's a human. So
I do that too.
yeah, I do that. But she can hear me, I swear. So we're good. I think
It's like,
this
you
one.
don't understand that. I'm like, okay.
If you don't talk to your pets, you're a psychopath. I'm sorry.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
You don't talk to
I used
them.
to get
Yeah.
I used to get really weird looks off the postman when I was sat out in the garden with 2 snakes in my hand and just talking to my snakes.
You would.
I might
snakes
look at
don't bother
funny
me.
with that too.
Snakes don't bother me. If you had tarantulas like my lovely boyfriend does, nope.
Have I? Yes, I've had tarantulas as well.
He has, I think the number is 11 or 12 now. I've never seen a single one because I'm terrified of tarantulas, but he loves them. And I'm like, you want to be my main seizure trigger?
There's nothing. Yeah,
Scary.
no. I was fine until I found a spider that was easily sort of that round underneath my bedside table.
I would have burned my bedroom down.
It was it was underneath my bedside table. But it came up and it crawled over my arm as I was falling asleep.
I would have cut my arm off and burned my room. I'm so afraid of spiders. I'm so afraid of spiders. It's not even funny.
I think that was that was like 11 o'clock at night, half 11 at night.
No. I'm terrified of them. I can't even
accept your spiders.
I can't even watch Harry Potter 2 because there's so many damn spiders in that movie. I closed my eyes for half of it.
The movie made me pee my pants in first grade twice.
So
because the giant snake comes out of the toilet in school and I had to pee, but I was like, oh no, a giant snake is gonna come out of the toilet in school, so I peed my pants.
Sorry, honey.
Like, why'd you hold it? Oh, there's a basilisk in the girls' bathroom. Oh my god.
The nurse was like, you can use my bathroom because it's private, and I was like, thanks. I was embarrassed, so I went to the regular bathroom, and my teacher saw me leaving, and she was like, Grace, I'm proud of you.
Sorry to laugh, but
I'm just, from now on, I'm just gonna say, well, now the whole world knows. But from now on, I'm just going to seriously see my pants in first grade.
Thinking it is the beginning of healing.
It's okay. We've all had embarrassing stories like
Ow.
that.
Well, seizures, you can release your,
I pee every time.
bowels separately.
Oh, I peed
Yeah.
my pants in finals week in a packed, quiet floor, of course, library.
I've done it at work,
You can't help it.
at the petrol station that I'm working at the moment.
I had one at the DMV, I think, and like my bladder is so weak from incontinence every single time. It just happens, and it's like I started and I was like, oh, I'm wearing black pants, and I was like, you know what, whatever. I just stood there and kept going to the bathroom. It's like
Figure it out.
No holding back once the floodgates go.
like, well, it's already like semi-soaked. I might as well just take advantage of it. Like,
Thank God for black pants.
I stopped caring though. Whoa, I don't know who you are, but okay.
Well, that's part of
That's-
the like, BTW. You'd like to know that ahead of time, right? Like,
Yeah.
you might also experience this. Like,
Right.
Or like when I sneeze, sometimes I pee myself, and I'm like, cool, we're doing this
That's one of
today.
the things
All
I've got trouble accepting is the fact that it will happen, and
Yeah,
being in
exactly.
public and it happening. I mean, I was on the way up to Twickenham, I think, to watch England rugby, which is like a massive stadium up in London. And yeah, we'd literally just gotten off the train, and I decided that would be a great place to have a tonic-clonic, and it happened.
you don't get to pick always.
No,
No.
I had one surrendering my license to the DMV, and they was kind of like, well, there's proof that I should not be driving. Here you go. Take it off my hands.
That's fun.
Cut in front of the line. Just be like, yo, here you go. Toodles.
And it's like my mom was like, she said like everyone around was like, oh, you know, the whole thing. And my mom was like, that's mine. I got her. I'll be there in a second.
Mine. I had a seizure one time, not the funnel cake one, but I was working another time, and I was catering, so I was getting ice cream for people, and the person that I was working with said I was just standing there like, do you want ice cream, to someone like 5 times.
Like
They're
some
like,
creepy
yes,
ice
every
cream
single
vendor.
time. But I was like, do you want ice cream? Do you want ice cream? Do you want ice cream?
Some horror movie.
Right? Like, that's where people get the possession part, when you're just repeating yourself, like standing
And you're
there
just
staring.
creepy standing or staring
Like,
at
yes.
Or the
Throwing
people that
things.
think somebody's drunk or on drugs or whatever when they have a
Yeah,
seizure.
mine's like I stare and I'm just like it's to the point, like I said earlier, like I can't tune out of people because they're like, are you having a seizure? And I'm like, no, I just don't want to hear about your video game, sweetheart. Like talking to my boyfriend. I don't care if you beat the boss today and it took you 3 hours. I've tuned out 5 minutes ago.
Annie, quiet.
You play World of Warcraft.
What doesn't he actually does not play World of Warcraft? He plays Warhammer, which is even worse.
Oh wow, no.
You know what that is?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I don't know whose dog is barking, but my dog is really mad at it.
Oh, I'm
It's,
so sorry.
basically Dungeons and Dragons is what it is, but it's a different world. Is what he does. But he hand paints like little mini figurines that are about this big. Figures, yeah, and that's part of the game. So he enjoys like the painting part and all that stuff. I'm like,
Okay.
No, I've got friends that would literally spend days painting those
Him
little
too.
little mini figurine things.
Him too.
And
He
then
had a whole collection, and I'm like, I don't care, but thank you.
yeah, they would like bring them into
Boss.
school and things like that. That's the worst thing, is when they bring them into school and then whinge because you've stood on it as they were sat across like in the
Oh my god, I know.
playground.
And it's like,
And
I take it as my personal day with him. Oh, bye. Thank you for coming.
Bye, thank you.
I call that my personal day. He plays those little stupid mini games with his friends, and I'm like, I can read, I can do whatever I want. Go have fun.
All right, before I stop the recording part, does anyone have anything else they want to add specifically about acceptance?
I believe we're going to make this a two-parter because I feel like there's another part of acceptance we haven't quite covered.
Yeah.
Or we could go into in depth about, I guess we can say.
Yeah.
Because this is a big
acceptance
one.
again next week.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a big one,
I think
and
that
like,
would be wise.
and then I think that week everyone can share like how they've come to acceptance. You know what I mean? Like, and their stories and all that fun stuff, and the challenges we're dealing with, the idiots in the world, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a big one. I feel like a lot of people struggle with it daily, and I feel like even if you've accepted it, it doesn't mean that you don't still struggle with it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big one. But